welcome. You're watching Good Morning India. I'm Gargi Rawat. Stay with us for all the top news. A park crisis in Jammu and Kashmir. The army is called in while the government reaches out to the opposition to end the impasse in Parliament. Let's take a look at the headlines we're tracking. The Jammu and Kashmir administration requisitions the army to help restore power after 20,000 power department employees protest against privatization, cut off power supply to over 20 districts in sub-zero temperature. The NDA government has invited 5 opposition parties whose MPs are among the 12 suspended lawmakers for talks to end the parliament impasse, but the opposition is sceptical. They'll hold a meeting this morning. India's Omicron cases rise to 135. 6 new cases reported from Maharashtra. 5 people test positive for Omicron in Karnataka. Delhi reports 107 COVID cases after months and the first death after 10 days, while Mumbai reports the highest cases since the 10th of November. Our top story from Jammu and Kashmir, a major power breakdown amid extreme cold wave has pushed large parts of Jammu and Kashmir to the edge as thousands of employees of the power department, a development department, have gone on an indefinite strike. The army has been called in and has been assisting the state-run power firms to restore power. 20,000 employees are protesting against the government move to merge the J&K Power Development Department into the Power Grid Corporation of India and the handing over of the assets to a private company. For now, power has been restored in some areas after the Jammu and Kashmir administration wrote to the Defence Ministry.
That none of the service condition, the pay structure, the salary, the pensionary benefits, none of it would be altered to the disadvantage of any of the employees of the Power Development Department. MD of the corporations have clearly told that a mechanism can be evolved to ensure that there is a hassle-free and a streamlined timely payment system. So I think that always can be worked out. There was certain demand of regularization. For that also there is already a mechanism of a qualifying criteria in place. The issues pertaining to the joint venture that has been there, already the government has agreed that it has been put to hold. There can be a working group to work out the further modalities for the same.
Army has actually reached to the grid station, helping to restore power supply. And officials are saying around 50% power supply has been restored in Jammu, some areas of Jammu. That is what officials are claiming. But on the ground, things are very, very bad. It is complete, blackout in most parts of Jammu and Kashmir in last 2 days. And who would have imagined that the administration would call army to restore power in a place like Jammu and Kashmir? What employees are saying, they're saying something which has not been done in any state of Jammu and Kashmir, where you are actually handing over the power, entire power infrastructure, your assets to the private companies or the Power Grid Corporation of India. We saw in the videos the representatives of the power employees union is talking, giving their 4 points. What are their demands, why they are protesting, why they have been actually negotiating with the government for last 2 years, but nothing is happening. Instead, the assets and the resources of Jammu and Kashmir are being actually put on sale. That has become the major point, and they are also saying even their salaries are not being released. That is the point. There are deliverables who, their services are not being regulated despite putting the requisite number of years, many years back. So 4 demands, and the biggest demand is that there should not be privatization. The assets which have been created by the successive governments in Jammu and Kashmir should not be given to the private players or the private companies in Jammu and Kashmir. That remains a big point, and the Regional Commissioner Jammu, he actually talked during a press conference a short while from now. He's saying there are reforms and some policy decisions which may not be taken back. So clearly showing that this confrontation and this strike may continue, and the army has actually reached, as we see in the pictures, to these grid stations and the receiving station in Jammu. Looks like this the confrontation between the employees. There are 20,000 government employees who are on strike from midnight Friday.
As temperatures in Kashmir plunged, Srinagar recorded -6 degrees. No electricity in most parts of 20 districts since yesterday. 20,000 power department employees are on indefinite strike in J&K. They are protesting against the government decision to merge J&K PDD with the power grid and hand over assets to private companies. Since Friday midnight, employees have stopped working.
It is a systematic transfer of assets which will take place, which we are opposing. It is the fight of the people that we are fighting. It is not any demand of 1 rupee also that we are asking for.
कल हमको भी बोलेंगे कि आप है ही नहीं कुछ हमने इस तरह आज डेलीवेजन से लेकर चीफ इंजीनियर तक सारे मुलाजिमीन बिजली आज ये प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं.
At this wooden joinery mill, workers say they are without work for last 2 days after power supply was stopped. Meanwhile, residents are protesting over the blackout.
ड्यूटी प्रशासन होश में आओ. हम मानते हैं बिजली को प्राइवेट किया जा रहा है, मगर महकमे को नजरअंदाज करके डिपार्टमेंट अगर या ड्यूटी प्रशासन अगर अपनी मनमानी करेगा तो इसका जो भी रिजल्ट है वो ठीक नहीं होगा.
2 दिनों से तो बिल्कुल बिजली है ही नहीं. जब से एम्प्लॉय ने स्ट्राइक किया है, गवर्नमेंट को चाहिए कि इनकी तरफ ध्यान दे दे और हमारा भी काम चले.
The government says they have initiated talks with striking employees, but instead of power secretary, it is the divisional commissioner Jammu that invited power employees for talks. So far, no headway seems to have been made. Blackout in most parts of Jammu and Kashmir due to strike by 20,000 power department employees amid fears of losing power department assets to private companies. And it is the common man who is impacted most in these extreme cold conditions in Kashmir. In Srinagar, Nazir Masoodi for NDTV.
Well, let's get to the latest on COVID and the new Omicron variant. India's Omicron COVID count has risen to 135. 6 more patients have been found to be infected with Omicron in Maharashtra. The state has the highest count of Omicron cases. Earlier, 4 fresh cases were also detected in Kerala, and Omicron has been detected across the country in 11 states. Now, Mumbai has the highest cases of COVID since the 10th of November. Over 300 daily cases reported in Mumbai, and all 336 cases reported in 24 hours. If we talk about Delhi, Delhi reported over 100 cases of coronavirus in 24 hours, which is the highest daily spike in nearly 6 months. Amid the Omicron scare in Delhi, as the total number of patients infected with this latest variant of coronavirus are at 22. With the 107 new cases, the city also reported 1 COVID-related death, a first in 10 days. So given the situation in Delhi with rising cases, there is a meeting today of the Delhi disaster management to discuss this issue regarding the rising cases of coronavirus. The Delhi Disaster Management Authority will be meeting at 11:30. Well, let's go across to Akshay for more on this. And Akshay, tell us more about what they'll be meeting about, because we have seen a steady increase in COVID cases and now crossing 100 and the first death due to COVID after 10 days.
Well, yes, Gargi, what we are looking at in the national capital is again an uptick in the number of cases. Yesterday, in the past 24 hours, there were 107 cases. And this is not a one-off incident. In fact, the number of cases has been rising because day before yesterday, it was 86 cases. And 2 days back, it was 85 cases. So, yes, there is definitely a trend that the number of cases are rising. And that is why the government has also called for this particular meeting too. Because the number of cases of Omicron as well is a concern. Delhi has 22 cases of Omicron. And all of this is going to be discussed as far as that meeting is concerned.
All right, Akshay, thanks so much for joining us with that. So the DDMA going to meet today over the trend of rising COVID cases. Now let's talk about Karnataka, which has reported 11 Omicron cases. most of them detected in the educational institutions in Dakshin Kannada district. Of these 11, 4 students below the age of 18 have tested positive for the new variant. 1 student and a UK traveller who were fully vaccinated tested positive for Omicron. But the state's Commissioner for Health says the situation of cluster outbreaks in educational institutions is not alarming. NDTV's Shrija reports.
2 cluster outbreaks in educational institutes in Bantwal and Mangaluru districts in Karnataka, with 4 students below the age of 18, 1 fully vaccinated, tested positive for Omicron. College at Bantwal, 16 test positive, of which 4 are confirmed to be Omicron. College at Mangaluru, 19 test positive, of which 1 is confirmed to be Omicron. Speaking to NDTV, the Karnataka Health Commissioner said the situation is not alarming and there was no need to shut educational institutes.
By and large, we have had asymptomatics or very mild symptoms amongst the Omicron. So, and also the interesting part is that when we are testing the contacts, the close contacts, that is the primary and the secondary, not many again are detected with the Omicron variant. There is no immediate cause for alarm. We have had clusters earlier too among educational institutions. So no drastic decisions at the moment, but however we will keep a close watch.
While 5 students tested positive for Omicron, 1 was a separate case of an international traveller from the UK testing positive for the variant, taking the total number of cases of Omicron in the state to 14. While the international traveller and 1 student from one of the clusters were fully vaccinated, the rest of the 4 students were not vaccinated as they are below 18.
We should really look at, having a guideline on vaccinating the age group of at least 12 to 18. Possibly they would bring the infection to the adults also. And this we could avoid initially in the first and second wave because we had closed down this.
Omicron cases have been detected in educational institutes for the first time in Karnataka. However, the government says it doesn't call for an immediate shutdown of schools and colleges. But in the coming days, the government will soon be issuing fresh guidelines ahead of Christmas and New Year. This is in order to contain the spread of coronavirus. In Bengaluru, with camera person Kumar, Shrija for NDTV.
All right, news now from Tamil Nadu, where the Tamil Nadu Vigilance and Anti-Corruption Authorities have launched fresh raids at 14 properties connected to the former Tamil Nadu Electricity Minister, P. Thangamani. Let's go across to Sam Daniel for more. And Sam, this is related to a disproportionate assets case. Give us more details.
That's right, Gargi. Last week, there were similar raids at this former minister and properties connected to him. And at that time, 69 places were searched. And at the end of the day, the Directorate of Vigilance and Anti-Corruption Authorities had claimed to have seized around 2 crore rupees, what they call as unaccounted cash, and 1 kilo of gold. And now, based on the information they had received, they say now they have launched another round of searches at 14 different places, and particularly many at Namakkal, his hometown. He was the electricity minister, Mr. P. Thangamani, during the earlier AIADMK regime, including Mr. Jayalalitha's cabinet and later under Mr. EPS. He is also politically seen to be a very strong leader in the core group of Mr. EPS's team, and he's the one who also belongs to the powerful counter community that backs Mr. EPS. And the DVAC's complaint or FIR says they have assets around 4 crore rupees unaccounted, disproportional to known sources of his income. That's what the complaint says. And based on that, these searches are going on. But the AIADMK, of course, claims that these are politically motivated and they would deal with this legally. So far, at least 4 former ministers have been raided like this in the last few months, ever since the DMK government took over Garki.
All right, Sam, thanks so much for joining us with those details. So, raids taking place there in Tamil Nadu against a former minister. Now let's talk about Parliament and the government's efforts to initiate back-channel talks to resolve the ongoing impasse in Parliament may hit a wall. Messages from leaders of the Congress and Trinamool Congress have suggested the opposition, they have made it clear, stands together and has no intention of budging from its demand of the revocation of suspension of 12 MPs who were penalized for unruly behavior. Sources said on Friday, Rajya Sabha Chairman Venkaiah Naidu had asked the opposition and government to meet and reach an understanding. An invitation for talks was sent to 5 parties whose MLAs were suspended by the Parliamentary Affairs Minister. A leader of opposition in the Rajya Sabha, Mallikarjun Kharge, however, wrote back to Mr. Joshi, calling his invitation to just 5 parties unfair and unfortunate. The opposition will be meeting today morning to decide on their stance. But indications from the Trinamool Congress as well, where Derek O'Brien tweeted that Monday morning stunt from a government who do not want Parliament to function. Government calls leaders of 4 opposition parties whose 12 Rajya Sabha MPs have been arbitrarily suspended. They leave out 10 other opposition parties' failed stunt. Well, let's go across to Sam. All right, let's go across to Sunil now for more on this story. And Sunil, so the government reaching out there after Venkaiah Naidu asked that, some way be found out of this impasse that we've seen in the Rajya Sabha, but the opposition determined that they're going to stand united. There'll be a meeting this morning?
That's right, Gargi. Clearly, within the opposition parties, there seems to be one opinion that one way or the other, they need to come together. They need to be seen in unison. They don't want to be singled out, just 4 or 5 of them. And it's in that context that they say that all political parties must be together in terms of being united. It's just not, it's a united opposition who's been upset with the government of singling out and suspending only 12 MPs from those 5 political parties, and not the floor leaders of those 5, but everybody should be called and they'll take a call about this. But I think the real indication is that as we've been talking the last week, the Minister of State for Home, after the SIT constituted by the Supreme Court, has said very categorically that it was a pre-planned conspiracy. It's in that context now that the government understands one way or the other, it is unacceptable for them to accept the minister's resignation, even though he was reprimanded for misbehaving with the journalist. The fact of the matter is that opposition believes that he should resign. His continuance is untenable, and it's in that context that this standoff continues. You call it, just those. The excuse might be the opposition parties meeting. But we'll have to wait and see whether there will be any, because there have been a lot of back-channel talks, whether they will be able to break and go ahead today when they discuss amongst themselves about whether they should go for the meeting or not, and then secondly, whether they will be able to lift that stalemate of those 12 MPs who were suspended for bad behavior in the previous session.
All right, Sunil, thanks so much for joining us with those details. Now, stand-up comedian Munawar Faruqi, who's been facing a tough time lately after he had several show cancellations amid controversies, finally performed on Saturday in Mumbai. The performance was hosted by the AIPC, a Congress unit. Last month, the 29-year-old comic, dejected by a series of cancellations, had indicated he may not do any more shows. He tweeted that hate has won, the artist has lost, I'm done, goodbye. He had said in an Instagram post, which triggered a huge support on social media. More than 12 shows of Mr. Faruqi had got cancelled in a couple of weeks amid threats from right-wing groups. The Congress Professionals Maharashtra wing then tweeted saying that they would facilitate a performance, which they did on Saturday, that artists should have creative freedom as long as they abide by the Constitution and respect all faiths. Time for a break. Coming up on the other side, in Uttar Pradesh, the BJP has launched massive Jan Vishwas Yatra ahead of the elections. We'll get you all the details. In the run-up to the Uttar Pradesh Assembly polls next year, the BJP launched its Jan Vishwas Yatra from Bijnor, Mathura, Jhansi, Ghazipur, Ambedkar Nagar and Balia. They roped in the Chief Minister of BJP-ruled states and union ministers from the centre to attend and kick off these yatras, while Yogi Adityanath hit out at Samajwadi Party Chief Akhilesh Yadav, who is emerging as the big challenger to the BJP ahead of the polls. Mr. Yadav launched a sharp attack on the BJP a day after Income Tax Department conducted a series of raids on his party leaders, including his private secretary.
कल मैं देख रहा था इनकम टैक्स के छापे पड़ रहे थे, लेकिन समाजवादी पार्टी को पीड़ा हो रही थी। तो एक व्यक्ति से मैंने पूछा, मैंने कहा ये सब क्यों हो रहा है? तो मीडिया के उस पत्रकार ने कहा साहब आपको मालूम नहीं चोर की दाढ़ी में तिनका। मैंने कहा क्या मतलब? कहा कि 5 साल में किसी व्यक्ति की संपत्ति 200 गुना बढ़ जाएगी, क्या कोई इसके बारे में सोचता था क्या? लेकिन समाजवादी पार्टी की सरकार में सब देखने को मिलता था।
लेकिन पहली बार देखने को मिल रहा है कि उत्तर प्रदेश में समाजवादी पार्टी की सरकार न बन जाए, इसके लिए इन संस्थाओं का भी इस्तेमाल होगा। पूरा देश जानता है कि जहां जहां चुनाव भारतीय जनता पार्टी हारने लगती है, इन संस्थाओं को आगे करती है।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in Goa, where he attended the Goa Liberation Day celebrations. He felicitated the freedom fighters and veterans of Operation Vijay at the function. A Goa Liberation Day is celebrated on December 19th every year to mark success of Operation Vijay, undertaken by the Indian Armed Forces that liberated Goa from Portuguese rule.
आज गोवा न केवल अपनी मुक्ति की डायमंड जुबली मना रहा है, बल्कि 60 वर्षों की इस यात्रा की स्मृतियां भी हमारे सामने है। हमारे सामने आज हमारे संघर्ष और बलिदानों की गाथा भी है।
News now from the northeast. In Nagaland, a special session of Nagaland Assembly will discuss AFSPA. It has been convened today at 9:30. The session is significant as it has been called to discuss the Naga peace talks process and AFSPA in the backdrop of the Nagaland firing incident that led to the death of 14 civilians in the state. Let's go across to Ratnadeep for more. Ratnadeep, tell us more about what's expected at this special assembly session.
Well, this is an emergent session of Nagaland Assembly. This is a one-day special session, and this comes in the backdrop of the killing of 14 civilians, on 4th and 5th of December in Mon district of Nagaland by armed forces. Remember, the army claimed that initially the first 6 civilians who got killed was a botched-up operation, mistaken identity, a case of mistaken identity, but ever since that incident took place in which, this 14 civilians, these 14 Naga youths were killed, there have been widespread protests in Nagaland. We have been reporting about the protests and how, there is a buzz, there is a strong demand of repeal of Armed Forces Special Power Act, which actually gives immunity to armed forces in terms of that they cannot be prosecuted unless the center allows them to be prosecuted, even if they are named and they are booked in a case. And in fact, in this case, after the incident took place, Nagaland police took a suo motu case, and the unit of the Indian Army Special Forces, 21 para SF, they were named in that FIR. They were booked with IPC sections of murder as well. But ever since that, there have been widespread protests. In fact, Nagaland State Cabinet had passed a resolution where the state government has decided to write to Center urging for repeal of Armed Forces Special Power Act from Nagaland. But today's session, what we are picking up from government sources is that the session has been convened by the core committee on the Naga political issue, which is led by the Chief Minister of Nagaland, Mr. Nefurio. Remember, Nagaland is one state in the country which does not have an opposition. Even the opposition party a few months back, NPF, had actually joined the government. So this is an opposition-less government. So all the MLAs are in favor of the government. The government, in a way, through the assembly, will now pass a resolution in all likelihood against Armed Forces Special Power Act, urging Centre to immediately repeal it from the state of Nagaland. Even as the civil society groups, remember, in Nagaland, have given a total non-cooperation call against the Indian Army, the armed forces, until justice is delivered to the families of those 14 youths who were killed by the armed forces. So it's a very significant session which is taking place. There would be also discussion on the progress of the Naga peace talks, and therefore we'll have to watch out. But what we are picking up is that the session would pass a resolution against Armed Forces Special Power Act.
All right, Ratnadi, thanks so much for joining us with that. So that special assembly session today. Well, let's talk about India's COVID situation and Omicron. India's Omicron COVID count has risen to 140, with 5 more cases being reported from Karnataka today. These 5 cases take the state's tally to 19, and the active cases currently in Karnataka is 16. The Health Minister, Dr. Sudhakar, tweeted 5 cases of Omicron have been confirmed. Dharwar, a 54-year-old male, Bhadravati, a 20-year-old female, and Udupi, an 82-year-old male and 73-year-old female, and Mangaluru, a 19-year-old female. So 5 more cases being detected in Karnataka. If we talk about Mumbai seen the highest number of COVID cases since the 10th of November, over 300 cases being reported, 336 new COVID cases being reported in Mumbai. So the count is going up. In the national capital as well, Delhi is seeing an increase in the number. The trend is upward. So Delhi reported over 100 cases of coronavirus in 24 hours yesterday. That's the highest daily spike in nearly 6 months amid the Omicron scare in Delhi, as the total number of patients infected with the latest variant of coronavirus is 22. So with 107 new cases being reported, the city also reported its first COVID-related deaths in 10 days. Now, given this situation, an important meeting of the Delhi Disaster Management Authority has been convened today at 11:30 a.m. They will discuss the increasing cases of Omicron and the current situation. The meeting will be held through video conferencing. Lieutenant Governor Anil Baijal will preside over this meeting, and it will be attended by the Chief Minister, Health Minister and others. Let's go across to Akshay for more. And Akshay, an important meeting in view, what we're seeing happening in London and the fact that the trend is of increasing cases currently in Delhi.
Well, Gargi, yes, the biggest worry right now is the upward trend of COVID cases in the national capital, because Delhi has seen multiple waves of COVID-19, while the country has seen 2 massive waves. When we talk about Delhi, it has seen at least 4 waves of COVID cases coming up and then the wave going down. However, it has been devastating in the second wave of COVID-19, which swept across the country, when we saw that there were no beds, there were oxygen was in shortage, beds were in shortage, and people were literally running from one hospital to another just to find a bed, not even ICU bed. We are talking about regular bed, and these were the scenes the entire country has seen in the second wave of COVID-19. However, now for the past 6 months, the number of cases have been fairly very low. But now, yesterday we have seen 107 cases being reported, and day before yesterday it was 86 cases. So a few days back, 3 days back, it was 85 cases. So this is not just one-off incident where the number of cases have gone up. The trend is going up, and that is biggest concern for not just the Delhi government but the central government as well. So yes, today is the Delhi Disaster Management Authority is holding a meeting today at 11:30 a.m. and it will be attended by the Chief Minister, presided by the Lieutenant Governor, Niti Aayog member Dr. V.K. Paul, who also is one of the key faces of Health Ministry, will be present there along with other senior scientists too. Now this meeting is happening just to review the COVID preparedness in the national capital, because the number of Omicron cases have consistently gone up in the national capital. 22 cases were reported a few days back. More genome sequencing are underway, so it is more likely that the number of Omicron cases will only go up. However, it remains to be seen that what exactly are the preparedness in the long run, because what we are seeing in cities like London, what we are seeing in cities like Paris, if that in fact translates to a country like ours, then the Health Ministry has predicted that we can see an upward of 14 lakh cases per day. Now that is going to be devastating for our already a very overburdened healthcare infrastructure. So all preparations are being done because COVID preparedness, COVID etiquettes have gone down in these past few months. So that has to be strictly implemented once again, Gargi.
All right, Akshay, thanks so much for joining us. With that now, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences Director Dr. Randeep Guleria has said that in view of the rising COVID cases in the United Kingdom, India should prepare itself for any eventuality. We should prepare and hope that things are not as bad as in the United Kingdom. We need more data on Omicron. Whenever there is a surge in cases in other parts of the world, we need to monitor it closely and be prepared for any eventuality. It's better to stay prepared than to get caught off guard. In other news from Tamil Nadu now, and the Tamil Nadu Vigilance and Anti-Corruption Authorities have launched fresh raids at 14 properties belonging to former Tamil Nadu Electricity Minister P. Thangamani. A 4.85 crore disproportionate assets case was filed against him last week. Let's go across to Sam Daniel for more on this. And Sam, the party, however, has said that this is a vendetta by the ruling party.
That's right. This will be the fifth minister from the AIADMK regime facing searches by DVAC authorities over the last couple of months, Gargi. And the AIADMK calls this political vendetta. Remember, this comes as the state prepares for the urban local body polls possibly the next few months. And in fact, the raids against the former electricity minister, Mr. T. Thangamani, were launched last week at 69 locations, including properties owned by him and his associates. And at that time, the DVAC had claimed they had recovered around 2 crore, what they call as unaccounted cash, besides 1 kg of gold. And they also alleged that the former minister had invested large sums of money in crypto form. And according to the FIR filed by the Vigilance and Anti-Corruption Authorities, this former minister had around 4.85 crore assets disproportionate to his known sources of income. That's the allegation. And the AIADMK says this is political vendetta, and the former minister as well as the party, they say, will face it legally.
All right, Sam, thanks so much for joining us with those details. So, raids, they're taking place in Tamil Nadu. Time for us to slip into a short break. Coming up on the other side, the government has called 5 opposition parties for talks. What has the opposition said? That's coming up. Welcome back. Let's run you through the latest COVID news and Omicron news. India's Omicron count has risen to 140 with 5 more cases being reported in Karnataka. 5 new cases in Omicron take Karnataka's tally to 19, and active cases in the state is currently 16. The Health Minister of Karnataka tweeted the 5 cases being detected in various parts of the state and various ages as well. Now, if we talk about Delhi, well, Delhi reported over 100 cases of coronavirus in 24 hours, which is the highest daily spike in nearly 6 months amid the Omicron scare. In fact, the number of Omicron cases in Delhi is 22. And with 107 new cases, the city also reported 1 related death, the first in 10 days. Meanwhile, Mumbai reported its highest number of cases since the 10th of November with over 300 cases, that's 336 cases being reported. The AIIMS director, Dr. Randeep Guleria, has said that in view of rising COVID cases in the United Kingdom, India should prepare itself for any eventuality. We should prepare and hope that things are not as bad as the United Kingdom. We need more data. Whenever there's a surge in cases in other parts of the world, we need to monitor it closely and be prepared for any eventuality. Well, to talk more about India's COVID situation and the concerns over Omicron, we're joined by Dr. Padma Srivastav, Chief Neuroscience Center, AIIMS, Dr. B.L. Sherwal, Director Microbiology, Safdarjung, and Dr. Rahul Pandit, Member National Task Force, a Member Maharashtra COVID Task Force as well. Thank you so much, doctors, for sparing your time and joining us on the show this morning. Dr. Rahul Pandit, first to you, what do you feel right now? We're waiting and watching. We're still giving a count every day of the Omicron cases, but at some point we're not going to be able to give that clear count, but what is your view of the situation? What do we need to be doing?
Good morning everyone. The situation currently is extremely it's on the cusp of being very, very crucial, At the moment, we are sort of counting up cases in single digits or double digits of Omicron variant, and obviously the number of cases overall have slightly increased across the country. And we are worried. I am really worried that if we don't, we have an advantage of the hybrid immunity plus a very strong vaccination program which has gone. If we don't follow this COVID appropriate behavior, we will actually lose that advantage, and then we will have the cases go up in the next few weeks' time. We need to remember that every time UK or US had a spike in the cases, we followed 2 to 3 months down the track. So the history is very, very clear. We need to learn from this pandemic what has transcribed, and we should be very clear that in the month of January, February, we are going to go through testing times, and we need to clamp down our behavior right now. We need to impose all our COVID appropriate restrictions in terms of personal masking, sanitization, trying to avoid crowded spaces right now. I'm not talking about general restrictions for public. Public need to behave in an appropriate way. They need to shoulder their responsibility, take their vaccine and wear the mask. I'm talking about personal restrictions for everyone to take up.
All right, so your safety is in your own hands in a sense. Dr. Sherwal, what is your view? And also, there's still no clear-cut data on just how severe Omicron is vis-a-vis the Delta variant earlier. Now there's a study from Denmark that says it's not as severe as Delta, whereas there are other earlier studies that say something different. So we're still waiting on that, absolute data, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It is a good news that the reports till now are coming that this variant is causing the mild disease, but you never know. We have seen the time of April and May, so we really have to our finger crossed, and we definitely hope that it should be mild. But at the same time, because it have the capacity to escape the vaccination immunity and cause, it is very much infectious as compared to the other variant which we have seen earlier like Delta. So that is a worrisome part because we are, highly populated country, and once it get established here and number of cases which we are now saying as has just Dr. Datta has also said that is single digit or 2 digit, but we are almost at the same time way back in February. I think it was a similar situation, but then you remember the date which is mid-April. I think it was really havoc. So we really don't want to enter into that. And but basic thing is that government is doing wonderful job for vaccination and for other preventive measure, but it is in our own hand. Please, I just through your media, I'll say, please help to contain that COVID or it is Omicron, and that is the proper uses of the mask. It is not only mask, proper usage of the mask. People otherwise are just hanging the mask in front of the mouth, not wearing it properly for which it is asked for, and not unnecessarily go to the crowded area, not unnecessarily make travel program. So this is a really situation where we all have to contribute and just not look for the government to whatever they have done. I think each and every individual need to be part of the containment plan.
No, absolutely. And, Dr. Srivastav, if we talk about our vaccination so far, on one hand, there's a clamor for booster shots. There's also clamor for children to get vaccinated because it seems this Omicron also spreads. I mean, given that it is very infectious, it's going to spread among children who remain unvaccinated. We already have cases from Karnataka in which two, people under the age of 18 have been found to be infected with Omicron in one of the clusters that broke out in an educational institution. But at the same time, our overall vaccination, while we say it's great and, we have these records that we've achieved, daily records, but overall it's still, under 50% that people have received both shots of the vaccine. So we need a big push on that front. And it seems not like there's no talk of any new vaccines right now coming in like it used to be earlier in September, October when we were very, anticipating new vaccines. So a big push needs to be given on that front.
Yes, Kage. And let me bring another point out here. Yes, there's a lot of talk about this Omicron being very mild. It only produces a mild symptomatology. And there's also talk, coming from South Africa. There are certain researchers who feel that this is going to take over Delta variant, and that's a good thing to happen, so on and so forth. But let me just bring it a little bit of a caution out here. When Delta variant also first appeared, there were similar lines of thought. They also said that it is more transmissible because of certain mutations, and it may not produce a very severe illness, and that quickly changed. So this virus, we continue to be on a learning curve, and at this point of, I think we are existing essentially on a hope and prayer, because when you talk of immunization, it's of course very important that we get the 70% both dose vaccinated. But said that, the booster dose is also probably going to be built into the primary immunization itself because of the waning of immunity. And remember, it's not just against an Omicron. We also need a protection against the Delta variant, which is still there. And therefore, when you're looking at this 107 cases in Delhi, and you have 22 cases of Omicron, that leaves about 80 cases of Delta variant. So we also need protection there. And we know Delta variant is serious. So I think it has to be a very holistic approach, apart from what both the doctors have said, that our COVID appropriate behavior and our personal and the citizens' own responsibility to remain cautious and take care is absolutely essential and mandatory. At the same time, we also need a war footing in terms of research into tweaking the vaccines. It's just not Omicron. We don't know what more mutations may come. Maybe a holistic kind of the entire video in irrespective of what mutations can happen, target them. The second is, of course, the immunity which you get after the infection, what happens to that and what that is going to do in protection against Omicron. There are a lot of unanswered questions. But yes, I think the first thing, be vigilant, cautious, and that's a citizen's responsibility. Number two is that we definitely need to boost up that 70% immunization, and also start, I guess, giving boosters to the vulnerable population, because they need to be protected again, even against the Delta variant. And number three, I think also ramp up the research facility and maybe more better vaccines. And I think that's already ongoing, and there's a lot of hope on that. I'm sure when they got it done in a year's time, I'm sure they will be doing for this as well. But
all right, Dr. Rahul Pandit, do you feel we are better prepared now after what we went through in the second wave? Should there be a spike in cases? Should there be surges? And we'll probably see the surges in different parts of the country at different times. But do you think we are now better prepared in terms of oxygen, in terms of know-how, in terms of how to deal with the illness?
Gargi, we are definitely better prepared than what we were before. And that is already showing us, the results are already being seen to us. We are doing more genome sequencing than what we were doing a year ago. That is the reason why our public health department is able to identify these variants quickly. I am not saying that we are identifying all the variants 100%, but a majority of them have been identified reasonably well from the people who have at least had travel history or a contact history from traveling people. In terms of our infrastructure for oxygen capacity across the country, each state and the government of India have actually helped to ramp up the PSA plants as well as the liquid oxygen plants. The beds have been kept on a ready mode, so that in case we need to increase our capacity to fill up the beds, we will be able to do that at a short notice. Also, one important thing which has happened is that we have learned in the second wave that how to care for these patients at home. And if Omicron is going to give us mild illness, the way to go forward would be to actually have home care as the primary reason for patients to be cared who don't require hospitalization for any support. And that would help us ease the infrastructure a little bit and continue with the non-COVID patients who are in the hospital right now. Well, unlike the first two waves where the non-COVID patients actually did not come into the hospital, now the hospitals are full up with these patients. Just one more word of caution. While we say that this new variant Omicron is maybe doubly transmissible, but half or maybe 1/4 as lethal as or as severe as the Delta variant, remember that our population makes these dynamics work in a different way.
Absolutely.
If we have 10 lakh people active cases in the country, and if we only have 1% patients who are admitted, we are still requiring to have thousands of beds, 10,000 to be precise, to be actually looking after these patients. So we need to be very cautious because our population dynamics are different.
No, absolutely. So different to anywhere in Europe. Thank you so much, doctors. And really, people need to think about the doctors, because I can imagine there's fatigue among people about, with the restrictions, and they want to go out. But at the same time, it must be you doctors and frontline workers who are dreading the thought even of another wave of coronavirus infections in the country. Thank you so much for taking out your time and joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you.
With that, time for us to slip into a short break. Coming up on the other side, a special session of the Nagaland Assembly has been called this morning. We'll get you the details. Welcome back. In Nagaland, a special session of the Nagaland Assembly to discuss AFSPA has been convened today. This session at 9:30, so it must have begun at 9:30. The session is significant as it has been called to discuss the Naga peace talks process and AFSPA. This in the backdrop of the Nagaland firing incident that led to the death of 14 civilians in the state. Remember, there have been widespread protests against the killing and demands for accountability and action to be taken. Let's go across to Ratnadeep now for more. And Ratnadeep, this is a very, very emotive issue currently in the state. We've seen, those protests spreading to various districts, and now this special session has been called.
That's right. In fact, the special session would get underway anytime soon. In fact, the MLAs of the Nagaland Legislative Assembly have all reached the Assembly building. Now, this special session of the Assembly has been called in the backdrop of the killing of the 14 Naga youths on December 4 and 5 by armed forces. Remember that botched operation that has been reported in NDTV and other media in Oting, between Oting and Thiru village in Nagaland's Mon district, where the special forces of Indian Army actually, in what they claim to be an case of mistaken identity, first shot dead 6 civilians, 6 villagers, and then when the other villagers came in to rescue them, there was a scuffle, and in that again 7 villagers got killed by bullets fired by the armed forces, and several people were injured. In the next day, there were commotion in Mon town, which is the district headquarters. People wanted to storm inside the Assam Rifles camp. Assam Rifles fired. In that firing, another youth got killed, so 14 of them, and ever since there have been widespread protests. And in fact, the state cabinet has already passed a resolution where they would write to center to repeal Armed Forces Special Power Act from the state immediately. But this session is very significant because remember, Nagaland is one assembly in the country where there is no opposition. Few months back, the main opposition party NPF had joined the ruling government, so that would mean that all the MLAs are from the government. So through the assembly, the government would now in all likelihood pass a resolution after discussion today in the floor of the House, a strong resolution. That's what we are picking up from our sources, a strong resolution against the Armed Forces Special Power Act, asking Centre to withdraw it. So it's a very important session, also given the fact that there have been widespread protest, there's strong emotions. In fact, the civil society groups, particularly in eastern Nagaland districts, 5 districts of eastern Nagaland, they have decided a total non-cooperation with the armed forces. And all this is happening when the Naga peace talks are in a very advanced stage. In fact, the status of the Naga peace talks will also be discussed today in the assembly. So all eyes all on the Nagaland assembly on what it discusses, and in all likelihood a very strong resolution against the Armed Forces Special Power Act will be taken.
All right. Thanks so much, Ratnadeep, for joining us with those details.